All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. For the glorious return of CryptoScam, a show that I have not done in ages. There were a bunch of episodes back in 2017. We snuck in an episode or two here and there, but I could not think of a better topic to bring back with the CryptoScam series. And I have two amazing guests who you have seen on the show before, Bitcoin Mechanic and Giacomo Zucco.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be back.
All right. Hey, guys. Yeah, Giacomo, it's been a while. We've been missing you on the morning brief shows. Mechanic's been filling in the spot nicely. And hope you guys are doing well. It's evening time for Giacomo. And as you can see, this is a true fireside chat. I am in the woods of Pennsylvania. We're going to jump right into the show. But I just want to say that, man, that tweet that we're going to do a crypto scam on Monero really kicked the hornet's nest, to quote Bitcoin Mechanic in his DMs to me right after that tweet. And I just want to say that this is not a debate. Like, everyone is asking me to bring on the Monero people. Guys, this is not a debate. I mean, this is just why we feel that Monero is not the greatest thing in the world. And because of that, we wanted to present it in this format so that in the future, I no longer have to type 100 messages saying why I think Monero is a shitcoin. I can just send them this video. I did not prepare a lot of research for it. I did not dig into the technicals of Monero. This is just our, I don't even want to use the word expertise. This is basically our knowledge of the blockchain and our experience of being in the blockchain space for quite a while, and our general thoughts. Guys, you have anything to add as an introduction before we jump on with have a little bit of an agenda, just topic-wise, and then we're just going to dive right into it and have a fireside chat on it.
Yeah, just one thing on my side. The reaction you are having with your tweet announcing this is exactly, in my opinion, why one of the reasons this show is needed. Monero always enjoyed for a few years some kind of status of a honest shitcoin where people using it or researching on it were actually very honest about the trade-offs, the difference with Bitcoin as a production project, the risks, the limitation. Actually, the only reaction to your tweet that I liked was the one by Fluffy Pony himself, the maintainer, one of the maintainers of the implementations of Monero, who is basically reminding us that every Sunday the Monero subreddit is basically publishing a Skepticism Sunday, where they talk about all the ways Monero is broken and will fail. I've listened to some of them, not all, but some of them. They're actually good. And this used to be one of the best things of Monero, the self-awareness of people working on it about the limitations, the general limitation of shitcoins in general, and the specific limitation of Monero. This used to be the reason I was not really focused on Monero criticism, because people there seems to be aware and actually quite expert, and they knew what they were doing. Right now, the reaction to your tweet, if you read them, they are indistinguishable from the Link Marines or the Hex people, or they are literally indistinguishable from all those other scam coin reactions, and this is very worrying in my opinion. So this this shows that this is meeting.
Like, this one is my favorite. Hold on. The Marilyn Monroe, right? So here. So I sent it. So Marilyn Monroe quoted my tweet with very detailed stuff. Clearly a follower of mine for a while, even though she disagrees. So here's what happens when you click on her profile. Follows one person, me, with 0 followers,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's exactly like, how do you distinguish? And when I pointed this out, here is the amazing reply. Like,
This is one coin level, guys. So I know that not everybody working on Monero or studying Monero is like this. I know there still is a huge difference, qualitative difference, but this is actually what worries me. And in particular, what worries me is when people are researching about privacy and they receive hundreds of answers like, guy, just use Monero. Man, just use Monero, you're safe. You will be safe forever. Use Monero and your privacy problem is fixed. This is highly irresponsible and dangerous, and so that's why I think this return of the show is quite needed.
Right. So, okay. So, Mechanic, any just like quick general thoughts, because I do have an agenda that we want to go through. We'll take about an hour. Hopefully, we can get it done in an hour. But just initial thoughts to uh, get us going, as I'm gonna pour a little bit of my tequila reposado.
Yeah, I think Monero is its own animal, and while we've rustled a lot of jimmies with this, I don't intend to be unfair about this, and I don't. There's a lot of straw men I don't really want to address, but like there's so many annoying like knee-jerk reactions from people saying like, haha, they're scared, they need to attack it. I'm like, guys, if it was good and if I was scared of Monero because it was a real threat to Bitcoin, I wouldn't attack it. I would just buy some Monero. The reason I'm talking, like, I don't need to attack stuff if I'm not going to be that dishonest with myself. I think there's so many things to unpack with it, but I don't know. We'll get into it, but I've tried to be as fair as possible, and I don't want to delude myself. So in my analysis of it, if I'd come across something like, how a lot of Bitcoin critics, if they have any intellectual honesty, they'll start looking at it more, and they go, "Oh, wait, I actually didn't understand this. It's good." And that's why you don't tend to have very intelligent Bitcoin critics, because the people that are intelligent, that don't get blocked by ego, they eventually just learn about it and go, "This is good." So when it comes to Monero, of course, I'm going to try and approach it like that. But my opinion on it really is not like I have of any other altcoin. It really isn't. I have more respect for it. And I do agree with what Giacomo was saying, that there was a higher level of understanding and more of a culture of people saying, look, we're trying this. It's got problems. There was a lot of integrity there. But from what I've seen recently, the Monero bro culture, it just seems to have gotten much more ignorant and much more dismissive of the trade-offs and of the technical limitations of what it can actually do. And it's getting a lot more hand wavy. And that's where I'm like, we need to do this show, because it's dangerous, because people are being told things that, you do a lot more harm than good by solving a problem that needs to be solved in a way that doesn't actually solve it well enough. And people are naively believing that it does. So, yeah, like, guys, we're trying to be fair here. We're not just getting on here, having a drink and going, lol, Monero's shit. Like, that's what I say to all this hornets that are going absolutely nuts at us right now.
Yeah. All right. On a quick side note, there's like a deer walking behind me. Not that that's all that interesting. Maybe I could zoom in and slide the camera to my side. You may or may not be able to see it. Though, do let me know if there's a bear walking around behind me. That would be a lot more interesting to either zoom in on, or for me to run away from here. Which, by the way, does happen. There's there you see the deer in the corner there. You see the deer in the corner.
He's very good with privacy. I don't see him very much, so it should be. It may be a Monero deer.
All right, let me get my camera back a little bit, and then we will go ahead on with the show. Gotta get that fire in here, since this is a true fireside chat. Okay, so where do we begin? So let me first say that, look, on the scale of shitcoins, Monero falls into like the top 5%, maybe the top 2% of the most honest, ethical ways to create a shitcoin. Like, we're not denying that, right? There wasn't a pre-mine there, as far as I know. It did start out as a non-speculative coin, which allowed it to kind of distribute amongst people. So there isn't this crazy early on centralization. It does have mining, which is good. Not as good a mining as Bitcoin. Obviously, there's no ASICs. It does have, a more diverse number of developers, though clearly not onto the Bitcoin level. And you may or may not be able to run a node. This is where, like, easily, as a pleb, this is where my expertise falls short, because I've never attempted to run one. So it's not that we're hating on Monero. And guys, please don't read too much into it. Why this show on CryptoScam Monero is taking place now and not in 2017? don't take my laziness as a sign of, something other than I just didn't do a show back then on it, right? Because the show kind of died because I got lazy doing research on shitcoins. Now, I've never really considered Monero a scam. Monero falls into that bucket of Litecoin and a few other currencies that are, I consider, bad investments, just bad investments in general.
I gotta
I
say,
don't.
man, it's like sorry to cut you off. It's like
No, fine.
if people have the right impression of what the project is, then it's fine. It's when people see it as something it's not. Like every Bitcoin has been fine with Dogecoin for years because it was a joke and it didn't pretend not to be a joke. But then you get Elon Musk pumping it and people putting their life savings into it, and you're like, this is
And now
fucked.
it's a problem.
Now it's a
Right.
problem.
And now it's a problem.
So,
Right.
same with Monero. Like obviously
Yeah,
ring
you're right.
signatures. Ring signatures are amazing. Obviously that's offering something Bitcoin doesn't have. And it's super interesting and we followed it. But people now have the wrong impression about it. The Monero maximalists everywhere that want to pretend that Bitcoin is a psyop run by the fucking CIA who are trying to, like make everyone do everything in public. And these are bad and wrong ideas, and you're creating a lot of problems because Bitcoin does have the potential that Bitcoin has to improve things for everyone. While not perfect, you can't detract from that by distracting yourself with things even like Monero.
Let's go through it piece by piece. And guys, we're completely aware. We've been in the space long enough. We're completely aware that Monero is very popular in the darknet markets. You don't have to remind us every second of every day. Like we're aware of this, and we will address it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's address it because we are aware, but there is also an over exaggeration of that regarding white market and other. So I would be more than happy then they take that also very seriously because there is some mythology around this dark market thing.
Right.
I'm looking forward to getting into that.
So without further ado, I'm gonna go back to screen share, and I want to start with, I wrote an article saying what is crypto decentralization and why Bitcoin stands alone. So before we tackle the darknet markets and whether Monero is or isn't more private than Bitcoin, and I know everyone is already screaming, yes, it's more private than Bitcoin, but you shouldn't think of it as, is it more private than Bitcoin today? Yes. Is it going to be more private than Bitcoin in the near future? Maybe, maybe not. That's what we're going to talk about. But I want to first talk about the triangle of decentralization. And as the article starts off with, let's talk about the decentralization of Monero as opposed to the decentralization of Bitcoin. Because at the end of the day, like what's more important, the decentralization or privacy, right? Like we all love our private messengers like Signal and maybe Telegram if you're using it with privacy feature, and maybe WhatsApp, but Facebook bought it, so I don't know if I trust that privacy anymore. And I know we don't have to trust, we could just verify with the code, but those are all centralized things, and people trust Signal Messenger as a private messenger, even though we all know that it's centralized. So having privacy is not end all be all, because centralization also plays a part into it. So let's talk about the centralization part of Monero versus Bitcoin, and I'm going to go in the order of the article. And the first thing I talk about is the decentralization of Bitcoin's code development. So yes, a lot of them are employed by Blockstream, and a lot of others are employed by Chaincode Labs, or at least funded by Chaincode Labs. We now have individual companies funding a lot of Bitcoin developers. But the point is, you have a lot of very smart developers. Look, there could be, your project could have the smartest developer in the world coding that project. If he's there by himself, or if he's the one that calls all the shots, there's not much decentralization in that development. Your project could also have 1,800 million developers like Ethereum seems to have, but that doesn't mean that their average quality is all that high. Now, to me, Bitcoin does the best job with high quantity plus high quality of developers where no one has any kind of central control on development. And I just don't see how any other coin, including Monero, stands up even close to Bitcoin's effort of decentralized development. Your thoughts on this subsection of comparing Bitcoin's decentralization to Monero's decentralization?
I'm going first if you want. So I agree. This point is very important. To fairly compare the amount of people contributing over the years to projects, you don't only have to look at Bitcoin Core versus, for example, the main implementation of Monero. You can do that on GitHub, for example, and now you are doing that for Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Unlimited. But you have also to think that in smaller shitcoins like Monero, but even in bigger shitcoins like Ethereum, basically all the development is concentrated inside the main implementation. While Bitcoin being a way more widespread and consolidated project, you have to sum up all the development happening in every alternative wallet implementation, second layer implementation. So if you sum up all the work going into Bitcoin protocol with core and Bitcoin core alternative implementation like Bitcoin Node, and then all the things that are needed to use Bitcoin securely, like multi-sig stuff, Spectre, Electrum, and Sparrow, and whatever. And then you think about hardware wallets specifically tackling Bitcoin, like Coldcard, and then you think about the infrastructure and everything. You will see that the comparison is really totally unfair. There is no match to the amount of review of Bitcoin code compared to some experimental stuff, like even interesting experimental stuff like Siacoin, Green, or Namecoin, and Monero offshore. For sure, is also a very interesting thing. The second thing I will say about this is that there is the figure of the leader, Fluffy Pony, Ricardo, the maintainer. He's not a Vitalik of Monero. He doesn't have that kind of totalizing influence. If Ricardo was going to get hit by a bus, I really wish he will not. There will probably something else taking its place with some kind of seamless way. But if Ricardo was going to get compromised, which I'm quite sure he will not, he will probably influence the Monero software development process in a very huge way. That's not possible. It's simply not possible in Bitcoin. Everybody in Bitcoin is not Satoshi Nakamoto, and everybody's just fighting each other in very substantial way. Luke Dashier against Greg Maxwell against a lot of other people, and there is really no single point of failure from the point of view of authority and trust in order to change the direction of development. This is very important. It's not just about look how many developers we are better because we have more. We have a richer constituency of people fighting each other about development their direction, and there is zero chance as of now for one single developer substantially disagreeing with others to steer the development of Bitcoin in that direction. And that chance is actually getting lower, and it's already quite low, and it's getting lower every day. With Monero, just like with other experimental shitcoins, it's the opposite. It's the other way around.
Yeah. So a couple of quick comments before I hand it off to Mechanic. So first of all, it would have to be a bus, because if it's like a fiat, I'm not sure what would suffer more damage, the small fiat car or Fluffy Pony. But I'm kidding, Fluffy. But people are saying that Fluffy Pony is not the lead developer of Monero, which may or may not be a good thing, right? Because if you don't know who your lead developers are, is that better or worse? Like, I can make the argument in either direction.
You could also, just to be fair, and then I leave it to Mechanic, I have to recognize that Ricardo made everything he could in order not to be a leader. For example, one of his most glorious moves was actually to fuck up all Monero speculators with a fake announcement back in 2015. That was glorious. So he put himself in the situation of not being the real leader of the community. But this stuff is hard. You know, even Charlie Lee tried to dump on his people in order to dissociate himself from strong leadership. But it's not just what you want. It's what is the de facto centralization of trust around a few figures.
Right. And here is the thing, right? When the leader of your coin actually departs the coin, there is a 50% chance that it dies. Like every project Dan Larimer has left has completely died. Now, Litecoin seems to somehow stay alive without Charlie Lee, and Dogecoin pretty much died after Jackson Palmer left until Elon brought it back to life. So if whether Fluffy Pony wants it or not, he is the leader of Monero. It's not up to him to decide this. It's what the how the community views the coin. And if if Fluffy Pony does depart, there's a 50-50 shot that Monero will hit an all-time low against Bitcoin, not including, let's say, the first year of its prices because it was too low back then.
Yeah,
and we'll get to the price part later. Go ahead, Mechanic, floor is yours.
Yeah, man, I'm not so sure. I didn't focus so much on development when I was doing my research for this. But one thing I'm seeing is a lot of hard forks that seem to go down without any hitch, which to me is just an absolute. That's just such a bad sign for a project because there seems to be no contention about anything, which it just implies a very small size, or at least a very small amount of people actually paying attention to what's going on.
Well, the hard forks part, the hard forks part I was going to mention in like part 3 of the decentralization thing about nodes. Like, because there's no contention, how many nodes can there possibly be?
I don't know, and it would be helpful to know that, and I admit I don't. But with regards to the other element of development, it's a hard thing to really gauge because none of the metrics are perfect. Like how many people contribute to Bitcoin Core versus the latest Monero release. It's not obviously it's not the most reliable thing we can use to assess this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I really agree with what Giacomo was saying there, and I don't think I have a super lot to add. I had a few things really jump out at me that escape me right now, and maybe will come back to me, and we'll revisit later in the show.
Yeah, that's fine. We're going to talk about other topics in the show, but the next part of my decentralization triangle is mining, and that's another area where every altcoin falls short of Bitcoin, and Monero's reluctance to allow ASICs to enter their system. They're still mining it with GPUs, and that's another reason why the threat of a fork in case of ASICs makes it difficult to have a robust mining structure and strengthen the decentralization of Monero with ASICs and more, I guess, burning of electricity. So I don't even have, I'm not even sure, do I have Monero on this graphic? I don't even have Monero on this graphic. And so again, mining, a strong mining ecosystem, burning energy, is what Satoshi created. And I just like I don't trust the development. The one other comment is, like, look, I acknowledge the fact that there could be government agents trying to code backdoors into Bitcoin, just like I completely acknowledge government agents trying to code backdoors into Monero. But I also give it a significantly higher probability that these agents can succeed in coding something nasty in Monero versus coding something nasty into Bitcoin. Same thing with mining. Because their mining structure is not as strong, I'm not going to trust it to secure the chain into the future. Remember, guys, Dogecoin mining failed. It literally failed. Dogecoin mining is merge mine with Litecoin because their mining has failed. The probability of that happening in Monero, I believe, is significantly higher than in Bitcoin, which is another reason to potentially stay away from Monero. Giacomo, your thoughts on the mining of Monero?
Yeah, basically, this may be a little bit counterintuitive for people, but ASICs are unavoidable unless you have centralization of development again. So there is basically this meme, there is not such a thing as ASIC resistance. The point is that ASICs just mean that you take any kind of software automatization, any kind of software algorithm, so something that you tell your computer to do using its CPU or using its GPU, or what you were programming into your FPGA, you take that program and you create a physical logical representation of that program in hardware. That means that every single thing that you can algorithmically program can be eventually, if there is incentive for that, be printed physically in some kind of hyper efficient specific computer. So if you run any kind of program on a generic computer, you can build a specific computer that can only do that, physically speaking, where every kind of logic choice is hardwired. And then this computer will be more efficient. And in a mining kind of game, it will drive any competition out of the market for basically over competing in terms of efficiency. So you cannot make anything ASIC resistance. The only way is that you create some source which is outside the system, is not automatic, is not wired into the algorithm, and you interrogate this external oracle in order to change radically, and not even just a bit, but radically, your algorithm. In this case, an ASICs is useless because once you created the ASICs, it will be destroyed. But in this case, you're gonna have in perpetuity a group of people that can easily coordinate all the other nodes in order to change radically the mining algorithm. So either you have a strong coordination, which is a strong centralization, because coordination is only possible with a centralized trust structure. Otherwise, every time you will have contention, and the more the project goes on, in 10 years, it will not be possible to organize a Bitcoin hard fork every 6 months. It's probably not possible even now to organize any hard fork on Bitcoin. In Monero, that happens every a few months in order to run away from ASIC building. The problem is that there is no such a thing as ASIC resistance. That's why already, I think in 2014, Andrew Postra wrote a very convincing piece that, to my knowledge, has not been refuted anyhow, which says that the goal that mining should have to be secure is actually ASIC friendliness. The easier you make an ASIC, then the lower the competition, the barrier to competition will be for other ASIC producers to enter and compete. The higher you make the difficulty to build an ASIC, the more somebody will eventually build it anyway, and then it will not have competition, because building it with a more complex algorithm will be more expensive than building it with a simpler algorithm. So simpler algorithms, which are very ASIC friendly, they will just immediately get ASICs, and you will have competition. If you try to get ASIC resistant, you will basically have centralization of development, because somebody will have to tell everybody how to mandatorily update their nodes very frequently. So you have a strong command structure. And then again, you will eventually have an ASICs anyway, if you don't keep changing. And the competition to the barrier to compete with that ASIC producer will be way worse than Bitmain and Jianghu. So I think this also, there is a secondary point that ASICs are a vested investment, are a vested interest in Bitcoin. If you only have the coin, you can attack the coin and then sell it right away and run off. If you attack the coin and you have a vested interest in something which is illiquid, like a Bitcoin ASICs, you cannot easily sell it for anything else. Like you can sell GPU for gaming, even if it will be a lower price after the end of a GPU coin. But selling ASICs after you kill Bitcoin is basically impossible. So it's good to have people with a vested interest in the health of the system.
Also, we got people in a live chat that seem to have been convinced, probably by others that want them holding Monero, that having ASICs in Bitcoin centralizes the Bitcoin network, which is insane.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to ASICs, there are trade-offs. It's not as simple as saying it's better to have them than not. But I think on balance, the analysis far favors ASICs that run on simple algorithms, as Giacomo was saying, because one of Bitcoin's god-honest actual problems is the centralization of ASIC manufacture, because it's in so few hands. And if you make that more complicated, you make that even worse. Like decentralization doesn't come just from how many people are mining. It comes from where they're buying the miners. So, I mean, how that ties in with what exactly, I mean, Monero's mining with generic graphics cards, right? But you do need ASICs, but you do need them.
I thought Monero was CPU mined.
No, it's GPU mined.
They moved on to GPUs already?
Well, now you got me questioning myself. I might be wrong about that.
I think since they're also using botnets, so I think it may still be competitive using CPU. I mean, well,
it is using CPUs. Like Pirate Bay used to make you mine Monero if you would just leave your Pirate Bay window open. They were unapologetic about it too, which is fun.
And other browser malware, they were mining Monero. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with Giacomo, though. It doesn't lend a lot of security to the network if people are only mining that way. It does with Bitcoin because you have all these miners in China now that have to be used to mine a SHA-256 coin, and they're going to find their way back to Bitcoin. And anyone that gets hold of one, if they use it to attack it, all they're doing is making the device worthless. So they're just not going to do that. There's so many other incentives to take into account when you move away from ASICs that it becomes really hard to do a completely truthful or a completely all-encompassing analysis. So, but I definitely agree that the best way to go with mining is ASICs.
To add to mechanics point of trade-off, like I don't think ASICs are worse about centralization. I think they're better because if you don't have ASICs, either you have a very high barrier when you will have them, or you will have a strong centralization to change the algorithm all the time. But for example, a very bad point about ASICs would be plausible deniability, which is important for privacy. This is a point in favor of stuff like Monero. If you have a huge server farm just doing graphical rendering or doing hash collision or protein folding or whatever, you can easily hide cryptocurrency mining inside that facility because it will use commodity hardware. So you will be able to smuggle GPUs or CPUs inside Venezuela without special precaution. With Bitcoin and with ASICs, that's difficult because you cannot just say, oh, you know, I use this double SHA-2 chip in order to heat my house. I mean, yes, maybe you are doing cogeneration in your mountain home, but it's a little bit suspect if your piece of chip is actually burning electricity to do double SHA. While that would be better with graphic cards or with generic CPUs. So plausible deniability for the mining operation is way better without ASICs. But yet again, I think that's just wishful thinking because if you can do ASICs if it is algorithmic, and if it's not algorithmic, you need some external oracle to tell me what algorithm to use, and that's centralization again. So.
Yeah, the main,
right. So,
the overbearing point we're going to keep coming up against here is centralization. And this is what I wanted to say about development as well. Bitcoin kind of got away with what it started as because, you know, we all talk about the immaculate conception of Bitcoin and how it's an unrepeatable event. But one thing that we can acknowledge, but acknowledge as a problem that eventually sorted itself out is not going to be replicated in Monero, as far as I can tell. Because when it was Satoshi, everything went through Satoshi. It was basically centralized at the beginning. Nothing really happened to Bitcoin's code base unless Satoshi agreed with it. You know, there were unilateral decisions like making blocks 1 megabyte. That was a feature of centralization that even happened. But obviously, Bitcoin grew out of that early phase and became decentralized. I don't think, well, for reasons we're going to get into with Monero, I don't think it's possible for Monero to go that way. I think it's going to unfortunately end up going the opposite way because in order to the scaling issues that Monero has means it's going to end up more centralized than it is now. The only reason it can be as decentralized as it is, as far as I can tell, is because there's so few people using it. The network hasn't hit the scaling issues that it's going to hit, as far as I can tell. And I just can't see any solutions to that aren't hand waving and dismissive. And you know, I don't want to talk about stuff that it's not quite that we're not quite ready for talking about yet. We'll come to those.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the good parts, which is like using it in transactions and you know, hitting critical mass and all that stuff. But real quick. The third part of the decentralization angle is the number of nodes that are running on the network. And I believe, and again, like I have not gone into digging into the code because as you guys will learn from the parts that we're going to cover right after this, we don't need to dig into the code. It's just like you could build the most private possible thing, but if it's centralized and no one's using it, then who the hell cares, right? Like no, you and we're going to talk about how Monero will never hit any kind of a critical mass to be relevant into the future.
But if it did, it would collapse. That's the problem. It's sort of its own worst enemy. That's the sad part about it, and that's why I kind of want to emphasize more than Yeah, but this is what I wanted to emphasize a lot on this podcast, which is if you have this ideology of privacy, I unbelievably respect that, and I don't want to detract from that. If you do all your browsing over Tor browser, I respect you sacrificing your convenience for your rights.
Yeah, you're not going to get much done because it's slow as hell. But yeah,
but the point is, I respect it. But the so that's why I consider it ultimate. When Ethereum collapses, it's a happy thing. It's going to be hilarious. It's not. We're not rooting for that with Monero because I actually respect the ideology of what they're trying to do. But I just don't. I honestly think you do more harm than good when you attempt these things in a way that isn't going to work because people make assumptions and they you do more harm than good than if you hadn't done it at all. I genuinely think the privacy issue is we're getting there with Bitcoin, and that's the cross-input signature aggregation provides an incentive for people to do coin joins and makes it much cheaper than if they were to do a regular transaction. That's amazing. That's like if Tor browser was actually faster and cheaper to use than the ClearNet, which would be incredible, right? That's kind of coming. It might be a while away, but it's not so far away. And that's the point is we can have privacy and incentivize privacy in Bitcoin. And that's not good for what the Monero people are trying to do here. And I genuinely just think it's I want what Monero is, but I just don't think this universe really allows for it to work in a way where we can have all the things that we want about it, because we have to sacrifice something and make trade-offs, and the centralization trade-off that is ultimately doomed to get worse rather than better. That's just not a trade-off you can make because it's too fundamental to what we need these things to be resilient.
Yeah, exactly. The point is that in order to have privacy, you need privacy tech, but you also need liquidity and anonymity set. You need lots of people using that tech. If you use the best private coin ever, but you are the only guy in the world using it, literally, that's not very private because the only block there, we just have one transaction, which is you. So this is an extreme, of course. But the point is that liquidity helps with anonymity set. So adoption helps with liquidity. So you need adoption. And the problem of Monero is the same problem of any other shitcoin, which is basically you cannot reproduce digital scarcity. You will eventually have a structural convergence of, toward real scarcity shelling points like Bitcoin, because there is just a finite number of Bitcoin and an infinite number of shitcoins, and you can create thousands of Monero clone and Bitcoin clone. So only the original will eventually have some kind of shelling point. So there is a reason, economical reason for the fact that it is unlikely that Monero will ever reach a significant traction, making it more liquid and so making also it more private. But the most technical reason, and we have come to the node part, for which Monero cannot actually reach this kind of level without collapsing, as mechanics said, is actually the way it works. So let me put this a little bit more general. Bitcoin already sucks at scaling because the base layer, the blockchain, is based on global consensus, and global consensus sucks at scaling. Basically, what you have in global consensus is that everything you do will have to be downloaded and validated by everybody else forever in the history of the system. So this is the terrible thing for scaling and for adoption, and that's why we are moving over second layers and upper layers. And it's also a bad thing for privacy because everybody will actually have to read. I mean, if I hand you a physical gold piece, nobody of the gold users will have to check that in order to validate it. It's just between me and you, and it's very private. In Bitcoin base layer, when I hand you something, everybody else will have to download that information forever if it's on the base layer. Monero is the same, but it's worse. What I mean is that in order to protect privacy on a global layer, on a global ledger, on a global system where everybody else have to download and keep our information, you have two choices. Even you go off chain, like Lightning, like Taproot, like other stuff. You take information out of the system, like signature aggregation. So you don't hit the blockchain with the information, and you keep it out. So you do privacy by omission. So you take some information out of the global consensus, or you put all the information in the global consensus, just like Bitcoin, but then you obfuscate that because you put more information to obfuscate. That will make privacy better, but that will be scalability way, way worse. Because, for example, Monero's signatures, they are bigger and harder to validate on a software, and that will become worse and worse as the blockchain goes. And then there are two parts of the global consensus. One is the blockchain, the way to rebuild your system state, and then there is the system state, which is for Bitcoin the UTXO set. And for Monero, just like for Zcash shielded transaction, is not the UTXO set. It's not the set of the unspent output, unspent transaction output. It is the set of the spent transaction output. So in Bitcoin,
unspent.
yeah, exactly. You have to track everything that has been spent forever. This is inherently unscalable if people use that. The reason for that is that privacy, if you do privacy by obfuscation, by putting more information cryptographically or otherwise, you will enter in direct trade-off with scalability. And Monero suffers from this heavily. It's even unlikely that you will have any kind of real Monero wallet on a phone.
Like,
so
the comparison when it comes to Bitcoin scalability, I'm trying to see it in terms of my computer science is pretty whack, but when it comes to big O scaling, I'm trying to figure out what it is, and it seems to me that it's off the chart because the UTXO set potentially, I mean, not even in theory, but in theory you can have, if being ignorant about it, if you were to have every single Satoshi as an unspent transaction output, if you divided everything up like that, you'd have what, 210 quadrillion UTXOs. That's still a finite number, and it's still something that is actually addressable. Whereas Monero, if it takes off and goes forever, you have an infinite amount of data that you have to sift through when verifying ring signatures, and that. There's the talk, I've seen the notion that you could reduce that, like the way pruning works, where you say, okay, we're only going to have a small subset of the spent transactions that people include in their ring signatures. But that's a really annoying argument because it's really hand wavy. I don't want to straw man, but if anyone's saying that, I think they're being disingenuous with that as a genuine solution, because that introduces a whole bunch of gameable things that you can do that you can use to de-anonymize people.
But also, like from what I'm hearing, the Monero transactions are insanely data heavy, which to me it says it's going to be very hard to run your own node. So if you are using Monero and you're not like validating your own transactions with your own node, you were fooled into using something. So you better be running a full validating archive, whatever the hell you call it. You better be using that node. And we're going to get to the privacy aspect of Monero in a little bit. But if you are using Monero, but you are not on a full self-validating node, you have a big problem, and you were like fooled into using it for privacy purposes.
I'd like
to Monero's credit again. Oh, sorry, mechanic. Well, I will be super quick. To Monero's credit, it's very, very rare that people run Monero seriously without running a node, because they also made unsecure stuff like SPV basically impossible by design. So this is a good thing. People using Monero, usually they are using full nodes. The problem is that running Monero full node is going to become impossible at scale, just like Ethereum. But unlike Ethereum, they're not fooling people into pretending they're running nodes when they are, and they are just trusting the miners like Ethereum full nodes. Monero full nodes are real full nodes, and most Monero users outside of centralized stuff like exchange will likely run their node on their computer, which will probably exclude everybody on mobile phone in the third world. So when there is a lot of discussion about this, but when you say we will serve people in Venezuela where they need more privacy, or in Africa, and then your node can only be run on a huge computer at scale, that's a problem, of course. Sorry, mechanics.
So check this out. So, I mean, we have so many Monero people in the live chat that it's getting comical. So they're claiming that you can run a Monero full node on your Android phone.
Yeah, sure. Also a core, but you just have to connect it. Yeah, you just have to connect it on your or on your hard drive, giant hard drive, and to your optical fiber, and then Wi-Fi, and then of course you can you can do Bitcoin with a core. The problem is that that's not what we are talking about when we talk about addressing mobile markets, mobile only markets like Africa or South America. That's not the point. It's not connecting your Android with a giant hard drive and the optical fiber.
Right.
It's about yes.
Not just that, but I mean, Monero hasn't. These are future issues. It's not currently much of a. No one's saying running a Monero node is impossible at the moment, but that's only. It's only made possible because the design of the network isn't being utilized to the point where nodes become impractical yet. Look at a Monero block explorer. Every block has about 4 transactions in it. That's insane. Bitcoin's dealing with thousands of transactions every block, and it's got a whole layer 2 network doing millions in each. Well, in potentially anyway. We don't really know what goes on inside the Lightning Network by design, but the fact that
or the liquid sidechain, which people always forget about.
Yeah, of course. But the point is, we're not saying, we're not comparing Monero. We're not looking at it what it's doing now. We're looking at what it's going to do in the future, because my general opinion on it is it's not built to last. It kind of only exists at the moment. This will really annoy Monero people, but the fact that Bitcoin exists simultaneously is why Monero can continue ticking along, because if it takes the load off, and so many shitcoins don't have the load because everything just goes to Bitcoin. But also at the same time, Monero's biggest problem is that Bitcoin exists because it's good enough and it's so much better, and it's the magnet for all the energy for decentralized money.
Also, Monero's biggest blessing is that Bitcoin exists, because if Bitcoin was to implode tomorrow, first of all of these shitcoins, including Monero, would probably go to zero, because it would prove that none of these blockchains are actually decentralized. And 2, if it does send a bunch of users into Monero, the code base would probably implode under the massive amount of usage. And people in the live chat did tell me that the Monero blockchain is 115 gigabytes in size. So please show me an Android phone that can store 115 terabytes in size and of data inside of it. Not terabytes, like gigabytes. And also a pruned node is about 30 gigs, but we're not talking about pruned nodes. We're talking about full nodes. So yeah, you can run an Android phone and
pruned is full. I've understood that. Yeah, pruned counts because you're still fully verified. It's just not remembering all the data. It's valid to use a pruned node. I didn't think this, and I've since been had to correct my opinion on that. But
I'm still slightly against that. I still have my arguments, and my arguments are more into the future, right? Like eventually, if everyone believes that a pruned node is a full node, you could get into a situation where 4 people have the entire old history.
Yeah, that's no good.
But it's very difficult to cancel data forever. Even like forbidden movies or stuff like that, you cannot really delete data from the internet. So as long as a few people, not 4 maybe, but as long as few hundred people have a copy of the current blockchain, it's not really a point of having it handy. It's more a point like being able to validate it faster than it grows. And for example, in Ethereum right now, on a normal computer with a normal network, you cannot validate faster than the growth. You have to trust miner and just dismiss validation. On Monero, you can, but as Mechanic was saying, you can only because nobody, quote unquote, is actually using that at the same intensity as Bitcoin. With the same matrix of Bitcoin, it would be completely unmanageable.
I don't think they're using it with the same intensity as Dogecoin. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very small. There is very small activity, a small user base, and the design is so that there cannot be much more of that without the collapse of the validating node capability.
Well, right. So you know what? Let's switch to the usage side of it, and the fact that no one uses it before we get on to the Darknet usage of it. We're not going to talk about nodes much. Obviously, there's not going to be that many nodes. Because Monero, just like everything else, is all about hype. But look, guys, Monero has been around for 6 years or 7 years. If you were relevant you would be higher than Shiba Inu coin on coin market cap. Like the free market has kind of somewhat decided where you stand, somewhere between EOS and Shiba Inu, which is, to me, is really, really funny.
Yeah, let me counteract you on this, since we are doing this attempt at total fairness, which Monero shields on Twitter don't deserve, but respectable Monero people do deserve. This metric can be misleading, because the point is that, you remember when I did Zach's box, the guy who did it for me created like 1 billion of supply. Then I bought one Zach's box for $1, and so basically I made it to the top 10. But the trick was that there was no volume. Basically, it was just me buying that. And the trick is the same for Ethereum, where 60% of the pre-mine was in the hands of the developers, and especially Ripple, where 90% is like that. So I would suspect that the position of Monero in the market cap matrix.
But Giacomo, I'm going to counteract this and say that the 24-hour average volume of Shiba Inu is more than double Monero, and EOS is about 10 times more. So, yes, in your case, that is true.
I rest my case.
Let me weigh in. Let me weigh in on that, man. That just sucks. That people like Monero is better than Shiba Inu and Tron and all this other bullshit, and that's just sad. That really is. I'm sorry, Monero community, that you have to be and also I don't want to put too much stock in this, because one day it's very possible actually that Ethereum is top of coin market cap, because people can be really stupid, and stupid people are very easily have their money stolen. So I don't want to use that and be smug about that, and then one day have Bitcoin knocked off #1 market cap, because it can happen, and it's a meaningless metric. So if there's one thing I'm going to attack Monero for, it's not that. Because
right, I know I am trolling Monero here a little bit. Like, obviously, like, I understand the points that you guys are saying, but at the same time, like, the Monero people, they kind of wanted both ways, and I'm gonna skip the subject a little bit to the privacy angle of it, where I feel that the way Liquid is being built out inside the Liquid sidechain is incredibly private. Probably when Liquid gets critical mass, and Liquid was built with scalability in mind. So I think if critical mass hits the Liquid sidechain, the transactions inside the Liquid sidechain are going to be as private as Monero, and exiting the Liquid sidechain does not have the same KYC and doxing issues as leaving Monero into Bitcoin, plus not to mention the currency risk. So here is where the Monero people want to eat have their cake and eat it too, where they demonize like hell the privacy inside the Liquid sidechain, because the Liquid sidechain is federated. Well, at the same, which means that the Liquid sidechain is not as decentralized as Monero, according to them, and that's why Monero's privacy is superior, because they are more decentralized than what's inside the Liquid sidechain, while at the same time, they are demonizing the Bitcoin on-chain with using privacy measures, because it's not as private on-chain, but that one is more decentralized. So they're claiming that they're more private because they're decentralized, while at the same time, they are claiming they're more private even though they're not as decentralized. So you guys got to pick one. And either way, Bitcoin will win, either inside the Liquid sidechain with better scalable, equal privacy to Monero, or better decentralization features with slightly less privacy than Monero on-chain, with all kinds of joint markets and coin joins and the Taproot stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, your thoughts on this?
I think there's a couple of things. First off, the price. You do actually need your currency to go up in price, because the miners are getting paid in that currency, and you need miners to secure the network. So if Bitcoin was worth $10 today, it would be dead, not just subjectively, but objectively. You'd be absolutely screwed. The incentives need to align, and it's called number go up technology as a joke, but it actually is integral to how it works. You can't support the ecosystem without a high price.
Which is why the mining of Dogecoin died. And eventually Litecoin mining will die too.
Yep, but I mean, there's a second point to make, but it escapes me right now. I think Giacomo has something to say anyway.
No, well, your point is really important. I tried also to counter tone a little bit about the market cap metric, but he basically destroyed my point with the volume metric. Volumes are very important. It's true that the volumes you see on coin market cap are easy to get, just as easy to game as the market cap, because they may be fake volume. You can pay in exchange to fake volume and stuff. But volume is very important, especially for privacy. Price is important for incentives and for security of an anti-double spending network like miners, but also price and volume are very important for liquidity. If you don't have liquidity, again, you don't have anonymity set and you don't have privacy. If in order to move your privacy coin, you need first to buy it from a super liquid market where only 3 people have it, and you are one of the 3 people buying it. The order book you have to go through in order to buy, it's super, it's like a bottleneck of privacy as well. So the market cap may not be a fundamental metric and it's super easy to game, but the volume, even if it's super easy to game, that's a very important metric for privacy as well. You need to hide in the crowd, basically.
Yeah, I think to zoom out on this a little bit as well. The thing that's sort of driving me a bit crazy about it is no, actually, I need to consider this point a little bit more. Let's move on to the next thing before I make that point.
I wanted to just counteract also a little bit the thing about liquid. In general, I agree. Just to be pedantic, so since we are trying to be super objective, liquid doesn't have an equivalent privacy than Monero right now. It's comparable in some ways, especially if you do coin join on liquid. Basically, the point in coin join is that you can easily mess up the transaction graph, destroying the deterministic links, unless if you accept that you have to account for amount correlation. So if you look at the coin join, the transaction graph is basically broken, but then you can do amount correlation, and that can repristinate some kind of correlation. In liquid, you only have one aspect of Monero equivalent, which is confidential transaction. With confidential transaction, you hide the amounts, and if you hide the amounts, then if you do a coin join on liquid, which I don't think there is even a tool to do that right now, then you can probably reach a comparable privacy than you will have in Monero ring signatures. Monero has basically 2 major privacy features. One is a bulletproof to hide the amounts, and the second is ring signature to mix up the transaction graph input and output among different people. So it's like a little bit like a coin join equivalent and the confidential transaction equivalent. Liquid only has the second. Also, liquid being permissioned for peg out, you may be censored when you try to peg out. You can still atomic swap, and this is a very important point. Maybe we will get into that later more. But atomic swap are easier inside the same currency than among different currencies, because when you try to atomic swap between Bitcoin and Monero, you will have a price volatility, and you will have the free American option problem, and you will have any kind of problem to manage. If you swap between Bitcoin and Bitcoin, or between Bitcoin and liquid Bitcoin and back, then you don't have the price problem, and it's easier to implement the atomic swap. So that's a win. The fact that having a shitcoin is the price volatility on the shitcoin is a liability for atomic swaps too, and so that forces you to go back. If liquid coin was volatile, you will have to go back to an order book to do the swap, and that will reduce your anonymity a lot.
Yeah, you want to stay within Bitcoin, and if you can use privacy tech on Bitcoin, you lose a lot of the issues that you create for yourself by using an altcoin. And even, I don't know if this is a good time to make the point, but if you zoom out, one of the problems I've had endlessly in this space with people just being so passionate to defend stuff, and this is true of Bitcoiners too, that because Bitcoin has its problems and we pretend it's perfect. But the reason we have to do that is because everyone attacks us. Everyone attacking us attacks us for the wrong reasons. Usually, they don't have intelligent criticisms to make. But when you're debating big blockers and people that have just stupid opinions on it, they never acknowledge trade-offs. They always just go, this is better. And the small blockers are always there's always the side with integrity, and the small blockers with the side with integrity, because they're like, look, of course we want cheaper transactions, but here's the trade-off if we have cheaper transactions. And this is the thing. Of course, we want all of the privacy tech that's in Monero. Look, Bitcoiners are not. I see the most stupid stuff, and I'm trying really hard not to be gratuitous and to make straw man arguments, but I keep seeing people say, CIA surveillance coin, of course you want to attack Monero and destroy everyone's privacy and all that. No, of course we don't. We are in Bitcoin for the right reasons, and we wish it could be private, but we don't accept the trade-offs that come when you add all this privacy tech into your cryptocurrency, because you lose so much other stuff. And I just don't see that being acknowledged anymore. Like,
it's not only that. It's not only that. That's part of it, right? Like, from looking at it independently, you add that privacy and you take away so much other good stuff that Bitcoin is better than Monero on. Now, all of that, you now have to multiply it by magnitudes of 1,000 with the fact that in order for your shitcoin, and yes, I'm calling Monero a shitcoin, in order for your shitcoin to succeed, Bitcoin has to die. And they don't acknowledge that fact, that in order for them to succeed, Bitcoin has to die. You are insecure inflation on top of Bitcoin sound money. So unless you feel that Bitcoin can't scale, your coin will not succeed, or you anticipate Bitcoin dying. And no Monero guy will ever admit that they want Bitcoin to die, whether they understand the fact that Bitcoin has to die in order for them to actually succeed long term.
No, but this is the cruel court between. It's the catch-22 of the whole thing. If they need Bitcoin to die, but at the same time, if Bitcoin does die, it would also kill them. And because Bitcoin would bring down the whole space if it died. No one would trust anything. If Bitcoin could be taken down, nothing, like the reputational damage of everything will be done. And that's just the same as, the scaling issue and the usability issue. Like, Monero's not working at the moment. The privacy is weak because so few people use it. We need lots of people to use it, but Monero's not going to work when lots of people use it, because it only works at the moment because not many people use it. So the blockchain is at least manageable and something where you can run a full node. So whichever direction you go in, it just kind of falls apart. It's never like, with Bitcoin, if the hash rate goes up, that's just good. If there's more people using it, that's just good. There's a good direction and a bad direction. In Monero, it's like, it just about works at the moment. But if it gets greater adoption, it suffers for it, as far as I can tell, and that's just so tragic a design that it just genuinely, it's just one of the few things I feel like remorseful about. It's not a gleeful thing for me. So I hope that's clear to the people that think this is just a gratuitous attack, because it's not supposed to be.
All right, we got to move on to the Darknet market side. So Giacomo, feel free to comment on anything you were about to say, and then kick us off. I'll let you guys have first say on the Darknet market discussion, because everyone is always like, what about the Darknet markets? What about the Darknet markets? So let's talk about that.
So yeah, a first line of response that people usually met when there is this stuff going around about dark markets switching to Darknet markets switching to Monero is no, that's just good because that's not good for Bitcoin to be associated with dark markets. Let me first say that I think this answer is completely stupid. If there is a reputational damage because you can buy whatever you want with Bitcoin, it just means that people don't understand money, and people who don't understand money will not be interested in Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin will be good money for people who doesn't understand money, then Bitcoin would be likely useless. So first I want to counteract the typical Bitcoin response, which is like, we need Bitcoin without privacy. That's utter bullshit. If you get Bitcoin without privacy, you cannot be permissionless. If you can be punished for the way you use Bitcoin, then regulators, first they will force you to use KYC and AML and that kind of bullshit. And then when you comply, they will also force you to add Fed establish inflation, and you will not have sound money and hard money anymore, and they will force you to to not mine blocks that don't include taxation to the IRS, and you will be forced to just run that code, because running the other code will be illegal and you will not be anonymous, and so you will be fucked. So the problem of privacy is real, and the answer cannot be, okay, Bitcoin is too good to be used in darknet market. Darknet markets are important and are the real metric of success of money. The reason that there is this kind of meme is that there was some kind of reaction, especially to Bitcoin fees at the beginning, and some darknet markets started to adopt Monero and other shitcoins. Some darknet markets also accept Ethereum of all things, which is like the less Ethereum is a privacy disaster, and some darknet markets accept it anyway, and they accept stuff like Dash and like probable honeypot like Zcash. But still, the problem at the beginning was about fees, and this problem is not going to be solved just switching to other blockchains. It can only be solved with second layers, and it's actually a good point by Bitcoin skeptics that no dark market that I know of is actually implementing Lightning Network payment. That's probably because of the state of privacy of Lightning Network right now. Lightning Network could be private, a privacy improvement, a privacy tool, because it moves information off chain. So it basically destroys the chain analysis side of the things. But it also implies a lot of other privacy problem on the network part, because you have to show your node and stuff like that. It's real time. You have to be online to receive. It's pretty dangerous on this other side. So first of all, I want to acknowledge this criticism. That said, if you actually take a time looking into these claims, and I would suggest you to do it, because it's nice to talk about darknet markets, but let's look into them. Go there, don't buy anything if you don't, but just go to the checkout page in order to try, and you will see that there are many there is Kilos, Spooder Market, Torrents Market, ASAP Market, War Market, Dark Old Market, Invictus, Dark Fox. There are plenty of markets with a lot of traction and liquidity and meteorological, a huge list of goods and services sold, some bad, some good, and all of them accept Bitcoin with just one exception. One single market, which is called the White House market, and basically the runners of White House market, they were very vocal against Bitcoin in the beginning because of fee problems, and then because of privacy, because they were like against the perception that Bitcoin was not good for privacy, which I think is a misled impression. And then what they did was basically use an external service in order to switch from Bitcoin to Monero if the merchant wanted it. But then when you went to the checkout page, usually the merchant asked you off-band to pay on a Bitcoin address. So it was very common to have merchants on White House to accept Bitcoin anyway. Right now, I checked I never checked. My cousin checked recently on White House market, and it's true that mostly the checkout process is Monero centric, and still there may be cases in which you are asked to pay with Bitcoin. Every other single darknet market only accept Bitcoin or accept Bitcoin plus a number of altcoins. I think the only other, maybe it's like Vice City or Cartel, I don't remember. There is another one that accepts Bitcoin plus Monero, but mostly Bitcoin. And every other else is either Bitcoin or Bitcoin plus popular shitcoins. So the volume of people transacting in just still completely Bitcoin centric. And this is also completely natural, because you have to think about, let me say this, and then I will just shut up. I think we demonstrated that the idea of having Monero as a longer-term decentralized store of value is severely flawed. If we demonstrated that, then you have to assume that the payer and the merchant will basically start from a Bitcoin store of value long-term to a Bitcoin store of value. So what you would have to do in order to use Monero on a darknet market? if you store Bitcoin and if your counterparty wants to store Bitcoin long term, will be to exit your cold storage, hit a market, a currency market, exchange Bitcoin with Monero, pay the other guy with Monero, and then the other guy will have to send the money from a market to the cold storage in Bitcoin. So now you have two Bitcoin transactions with limited privacy. Then you have two markets with limited privacy. And it doesn't matter if the market is an atomic swap. Even if it's an atomic swap, that's okay because you don't have counterparty risk. But even there, you have a public order book with bid and ask that everybody can see. So you can be de-anonymized by going through the market because everybody else can actually read who is exchanging with you. This is a general problem. This will be true also with the joint market and coin swap in Bitcoin. This will never go away. If you have a public market, a public order book, then you are losing some privacy there. Then you are sending with Monero, but Monero doesn't have infinite anonymity set. It just has some anonymity set in regard to the ring signature of that round and minus the amount correlation and stuff like that. So in general, what I'm specific triggered by is the notion that if you store Bitcoin and somebody else store Bitcoin and you just go through Monero to pay, then you are safer. In most scenarios, you will just lose privacy instead of get privacy. It is true that I think that expert people can use Monero as a part of their privacy setup in order to increase privacy. But you need to be pretty expert to do that. In most cases, if you go to the naive myth that just use Monero and you're safer, you will actually lose privacy instead of getting it compared to, for example, just a normal page on it.
Yeah. And one thing to remember is so much of this is focused on the one technological element of money, which is the medium of exchange element. And if I've learned anything from Bitcoin's whole development, it's that mediums of exchange are the most trivial use case for money. Even if you add a feature of privacy on top of them, store of value is fucking hard. And we'd never figured that out until Bitcoin. And I'm not going to lie, that wasn't my initial attraction to it. I didn't understand that that was what we were doing. I was into Bitcoin for the uncensorable, unconfiscatable elements of it. But now I've learned that there's actually something that has, hard money, store of value. This is an unsolvable problem. Having a medium of exchange and focusing on the features of that, are you seriously discounting the utility of something that is hard money, that is a reliable store of value, something you can ignore for 20 years and come back to it and not have all your time and, wealth robbed from you? Are you seriously suggesting that Monero is actually capable of that? Because that really is delusional. Just because it has, just because it's a superior medium of exchange in this one circumstance that we have right now, which I will accept, that doesn't suddenly translate into having all these other qualities that are just impossibly good about Bitcoin. And I really don't want anyone to deny themselves that. And I don't think any of the intelligent advocates for Monero and the experimenters actually do. I'm sure, I don't want to put, make too many assumptions, but the intelligent people in the Monero community are not using Monero as a store of value. Like they use Bitcoin as a store of value. No way. I'm not saying the scammy stuff like Vitalik, like secretly and Roger Ver have loads of Bitcoin and they tell everyone to buy their shitcoin. And
hey guys, sorry, the key word that Mechanic is using is intelligent users of Monero, not users. Like intelligent users are not using it as a store of value. So if you are, think about that statement.
Like if you're Monero maximalism is it's really stupid position to be in. Honestly, like you can respect the tech and you can really want the project to succeed and you can try and come around and come to solutions for the scaling problems we have. You absolutely can. But if you take it to the point of the kind of maximalism that you have for Bitcoin, then I think you're setting yourself up to be in a bad situation. And I hope that people don't do it.
This is very symmetrical with the scalability debate. So, sorry, Tony, just to draw a similarity. When you talk about scalability, usually you have like some kind of shitcoin like Litecoin or Bcash, and they eventually, if they're honest, which happens more often with Litecoin scammers than Bcash scammer, they will admit that that Litecoin is very bad as a store of value long term. And then you have to ask them, okay, but if it's not a good store of value, think about that. what you will have, you're thinking that you can keep Bitcoin as store of value and only use Litecoin as transactional thing in order to get low fees. But if you do that, you will have to move Bitcoin out of storage into a market, paying Bitcoin transaction, buying Litecoin, paying the market fee, sending Litecoin, which will not be cheap if everybody used it, and then do it again the other side. So you're losing money, not gaining money, unless you will just batch. So you buy lots of Litecoin now, then you will pay in many months, and then you will convert. But then you are using Litecoin as a partial store of value for a few months, which may be reasonable, but is often very, very reckless. Same goes with privacy. If everybody used Monero as a store of value, you will have a better privacy than with Bitcoin. But that's impossible for the reason, in our opinion, for all the reasons that we listed before, and the counterpoint to that we will just use Bitcoin as store of value and Monero for privacy medium of exchange, it falls down because when you actually have to move Bitcoin out of storage, change it, send it, change it again, and move it again, you lose privacy instead of getting it. So you have to batch transactions, and so you have to store Monero long term. And storing Monero long term, it is now and is going to be as far as monetary dynamics go, completely crazy in the future.
Yeah, and sorry, Ton, I got to make one more point as well. On top of that, one thing you should bear in mind, of course, is that centralization and decentralization, it's not a binary thing. You have degrees of it. You're not going to be totally one or the other. But the fact that Bitcoin exists and it's as decentralized as it is something that means that Monero users are actually being disingenuous with. If you type in Monero, it takes you to getmonero.org. The second word is decentralized, and it's not. An honest, actual reflection of what the network is, or would be just to say, we're fairly centralized at the moment. We hope that it increases. We hope that decentralization increases over time. That's an honest reflection of it, and it's not fair to call anything that's centralized in comparison to Bitcoin decentralized, because it's misleading and it provides. This is the thing. When you're centralized, the reason this matters is because when you're centralized and then you're only competing on features, that's it. You're not competing on the state of the network. So what happens if Bitcoin Cash turn around and say, okay, we're doing a hard fork in a week. We're going to add ring signatures and we're going to add, confidential transactions. They can do that. And then you're basically having a shit slinging contest between the two centralized ecosystems saying, well, we have this feature and we have this feature. Who cares? If you're missing the point of decentralization, then none of your features are really there in a reliable capacity. And that's just such a bad trade-off to make. That, have you ever considered, as a Monero user, as a Monero maxi, what happens if another coin that's about as centralized as yours decides to add your privacy features? Then what actually is the reason for remaining a Monero head? Is it just the brand? Because that's irrational, in my opinion.
Which goes back to the question you asked before. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to say Vitalik can just, fork his chain again, like he's done many times, and add all of this Monero privacy into Ethereum. Would that make Ethereum better for transactional usage on the Darknet? No, of course not. Their fees are too high because people are actually using Ethereum. And they've thought way more about scaling than the Monero developers. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah. A similar point is, I think this is a little bit off topic in regard to this specific part of the conversation, but I think it's very important. One of the honest advantages, to my eyes, of the Monero ecosystem is the culture. The culture, it has some flaws, in my opinion. I think that many Monero guys, they don't understand hard money, they don't understand store of value. They tend to be a little bit Keynesians, like you just have to spend, saving is useless. So they don't understand Austrian economics, let's put it that way. Some of them, not all of them. They have like a hyper emphasis over medium of exchange, and they don't understand the importance of store of value long term. But except for that, the Monero community is pretty solid on uncompromising ideas of privacy and sovereignty. But even that, and I envy that. I mean, I wish I could have that kind of percentage of ANCAP badass people in Bitcoin. and I don't have that percentage. But think about absolute numbers. The problem is again scaling. In this case, is scaling of a culture. When you are going to have the same number of Bitcoin users, traders, miners, developers, and hodlers, and speculators, and researchers, and teachers, and journalists in Monero, there is no way you can, unfortunately, there is no way you can keep that percentage of anarcho-capitalist bad assets. Not because in Bitcoin, I think that uncompromising privacy maximalists in Bitcoin are more than in Monero as absolute numbers. The problem is just percentage. When Bitcoin scales, you cannot keep that kind of pure culture anymore. We are called crazy toxic maximalists because we try to stay pure. But we recognize the fact that every kind of moron will use Bitcoin. Anti-privacy people will use Bitcoin for their own privacy, and statists will use Bitcoin, and dictators will use Bitcoin, and everybody eventually will use Bitcoin if they need it.
All right, let me
go for it, Tom.
Yeah, I was gonna finally jump into this conversation. Okay, since you guys brought it up a little bit ahead of time, here's what Giacomo meant when he said that in order for you to use Monero, you would only use it as a transactional currency because holding it long term is insane. So here, yes, Monero did have a huge boost in its price. Okay, so here is approximately the average price of Monero throughout its first several years of existence. You are still up 200% since that day. I do not believe that is going to last long term. Eventually, the value of Monero is going to drop below this green line. And then every single person that has chosen to hold Monero for the long term will end up in a losing position. Now, what that says is that it makes no sense to hold your Monero, which means that it's only a transactional currency. So you have to go in and out of it. And anytime you go in and out of it, you are faced with the same non-privacy issues that you blame Bitcoin for having. So this is why Monero makes absolutely no sense in the darknet markets. In addition, all of these people have been convinced of Monero's privacy features, but those privacy features are only if you're using Monero correctly. And false expectation of Monero's privacy is going to get you into a lot more trouble than learning how to properly use Bitcoin, than depending on statements like Monero is private, just go and use Monero. The fact that Bitcoin have clearly stated about Bitcoin's privacy lacking makes people go and be more careful with their Bitcoin transactions in order to get probably better privacy than improper usage of Monero transactions. Again, I was just on Clubhouse recently, and we had a conversation with someone that was under the impression that Lightning, I'm not going to dox any names, but about the privacy features of the Lightning Network, which are better than the privacy features of Bitcoin on chain. But the way that person was entering into the Lightning Network was through Strike while connecting his bank account. And we tried to explain to him, no, if you think that that is making you private, it isn't. Like, just because your Lightning transactions may be private after that, it doesn't matter. You KYC'd and doxed yourself getting into the network.
Yeah, man, there are so many ways. And look, unless you are sending money to yourself, there is no such thing as perfect privacy. There's always going to be some compromise to it. And Tone's point is actually really important. Like, I want to highlight that. You have to accept when you build technology that the stupidest people are going to use it in the stupidest possible way. And you can't discount that, really. And all we have with Bitcoin is, it's worthy of the mind share it gets, and it's been around for long enough, and it's reliable enough that people might actually start to use it with better practices, as like we slowly grind these memes into the community of not your keys, not your coins. That's fairly ubiquitously understood, even by the people that aren't necessarily the most clued up users of Bitcoin. Like, learning how to use coin joins and properly and stuff like that, it's hard. I hope people do it, they have a lot of time to do it, and it would be worth their while learning how to do it. But learning how to use other coins as well, it just creates. The reason I find it kind of unethical promoting anything that isn't Bitcoin is because it's like, even this goes for anything. Like, you want to learn how to, you know, you want to learn how to do something that's not even related to computer science or money. Like, the most worthwhile thing you can do as a human pretty much at the moment is learn how to use Bitcoin and learn how to use it properly. And this is why we get annoyed, even with the genuine attempts at altcoins. It's annoying because people only have so much time to learn how to use this stuff on board themselves, because every day they don't is a missed opportunity. And I hate the muddying of the waters. There was that woman at Bitcoin 2021 in Miami that just nailed it in 1 minute. She said, if altcoins succeed, it's because of Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin succeeds, it's in spite of altcoins muddying the waters and confusing everyone. And this is a really good point. We got to run at the speed of the slower men here. We can't just be like, yeah, everyone's going to understand Bitcoin. Everyone that uses Monero is going to use it for understand that it's a technical experiment that's quite interesting, that isn't to be treated as a store of value. That's not what's happening here. You're brigading people. You're telling everyone the NSA invented Bitcoin, and all this bullshit that we get with Craig Wright as well. People saying, "Oh, Peter Todd's a CIA agent." Blockstream conspired to keep blocks small to cripple Bitcoin. This is nonsense stuff, and it's really annoying. And if you have any respect for the project, you need to fight this and get it out of your community, because it's bullshit, and you shouldn't be bullshitting people if you have a real thing to offer.
Yeah, guys, this is the. Am I on mute or not? I'm not. Guys, this is the fate of Monero. Like, Monero is trying to compete with Bitcoin on one feature, privacy. Bcash tried to compete with Bitcoin on one feature, faster, cheaper transactions. Actually, they had two features, right?
Just
Here's
cheaper.
Their fate.
There was no faster.
Right? Yeah, well,
faster is Litecoin. They were just cheaper.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. No. Wait a minute. It was faster because they claimed it was faster, right? It's not about fast. It's about their claims, right?
Yeah,
they promote the zero cost. That's true. Yeah.
Right. It's about claims and what they can convince the uneducated population of their claims being true. So they were competing on cheaper and faster. And since creation of Bcash, it was down 90% at one point. And at the moment, it is only down 83%. And it only has one direction, down. It will beat this low eventually. I don't know when that eventually is, but it doesn't matter because it ain't going all the way up. So eventually, it's going to keep devaluing. And that's what people have to understand about Monero, that as long as people believe in all those claims, they can keep the Ponzi going, right? And by Ponzi, I mean Monero doesn't actually have utility other than money. And since Bitcoin is better money, eventually their Ponzi will be useless.
Yep. Whoa, you go, Giacomo.
Yeah, go ahead, Giacomo.
No, just to say that our problem here, in respect with Monero, when you talk about other shitcoin, you can just say this doesn't make any sense. This is not of any interest whatsoever. So you can look at Ethereum and you can say, well, guys, these are mostly just bad ideas. And you can look at other coins and you can just say, there's literally no idea here. So I don't even know what you're talking about. Like Litecoin was completely nonsense because it was faster blocks, but faster blocks is not faster security. You can debunk that in 1 minute. And ASIC resistance, but there is no such thing as actually it was GPU resistance back then. But that's nonsense. So the two features of Litecoin are nonsense. Monero enters a category of features that are interesting for real. I think there are a few other coins like that, like I think something like Saya coin with storage and Namecoin for DNS and maybe Green for privacy and a little bit of scalability again. And all those coins, I think they would be better off if they were two pegs, say, chain of Bitcoin, if possible, or one side peg burn chain, like you burn Bitcoin, you get this coin, or fork chain like Bcash, where you at least don't create inflation, even if you are scamming people about claims. Instead, they went to a competing a competing form of scarcity, creating inflation on Bitcoin. And this is just not sustainable long term. So our problem is not that this stuff is not interesting from a research point of view. The problem are just claims of long-term sustainability. And if you are a Monero guy and you think that what we say doesn't apply to you because you're not making any simplistic claim, you're not telling people just use Monero and you're safe, then we are not talking to you. We're talking to a relevant group of people that right now is storming chats on Telegram and conversation on Twitter saying, oh, Bitcoin is just not private. Leave that to the statist people and just use Monero if you want any privacy. And this is the very irresponsible behavior that we are addressing. This didn't used to exist in the Monero community just a while ago. It does now. So maybe it doesn't apply to you, dear Monero commentator. But certainly it does apply to many of your colleagues on many kind of communication channels. So, yeah.
Yeah, Monero maximalism is just painful to see. It really, Monero experimentation and an intellectual approach to it is fascinating, but it becomes annoying because we can't even entertain it without endorsing it. Like, I don't want to get Robert Breedloved in this whole thing, like, because I've come to research this honestly and with integrity. I don't just want to piss all over it. And like, I genuinely, I put it up there. Like Tom said right at the beginning of the show, it's up there at the top of the altcoins. And I barely would call it a shitcoin, but I have to call it that because of how it's being viewed now. I have to go, look, guys, you're exaggerating the claims of it. So actually, it would do more. It would do a lot more general good if I even get simplistic and just dismiss it as a shitcoin. It's annoying having to do that. Go, there's Bitcoin and there's shitcoin. They're all the same. They're all stupid. Of course, we want to get into the nuance of it, but that's gonna unfortunately just mislead people into people make assumptions of decentralization just because there's a blockchain, and they've been doing that for years, and that hasn't stopped, sadly.
Yeah. No, I agree with all that. And since Giacomo mentioned Litecoin, and I mentioned the fact that Monero is a Ponzi, I always reference back to this Luke Jr. post from 2013. And I think I'm the only one keeping this screenshot alive because I tweet it out at least a couple of times a year. And he literally explains it beautifully, and as to why Litecoin is a scam coin. And even I wasn't considering it a scam coin. I just thought it was, kind of useless going into the future. But here's what he writes. Bitcoin by nature can only provide the same value put into it. So in this raw state, it functions as nothing more than a pump and dump scam, as it simply redistributes money from the buyer to the seller. That's what he wrote about Bitcoin. Then he said the reason Bitcoin itself escapes this category of being a Ponzi is that it is a major technological innovation, bringing something new, trustless currency that has value to the world. By being adopted as a currency, Bitcoin can benefit even those who buy into it last. Litecoin and other scam coins like it, on the other hand, do not bring anything new to the table. They are just mere clones that retain the pump and dump nature of Bitcoin without the innovation that makes Bitcoin viable as a currency. And then he talks about the three things that Litecoin changed and why they're irrelevant. And he did this in one single post, which was incredible. And this brings me back to the final point, because we do have to wrap the show up, of Monero being used for darknet markets. Look, if darknet markets want Monero, you can have it. Look, the darknet markets were very instrumental in helping bootstrap Bitcoin. But Bitcoin no longer need the darknet markets to take it to the next level and become a global currency. If Monero wants to take over the darknet markets, fine, but it's never going to reach the critical mass that makes Monero worth holding for anything longer than a transaction. Now, this article here is from today, that there is a $70 million ransom going on right now. they don't actually talk about which cryptocurrency is being demanded, whether it's Monero or Bitcoin. But just because the Monero people are claiming that all the criminals are now using Monero, I mean, great, you can stand on that hill. Like, I don't really care to stand on that hill, right? Because first of all, you can't prove that they're only using Monero. And second, that's fine. And what I can say is a lot of these criminals that are asking for Monero, they have bought into the same bullshit that a lot of other people have, thinking that Monero is the be all and end all of privacy. People don't realize that probably 90 to 99% of all criminals, they don't get caught based on their financial transactions, whether they're fiat, Bitcoin, or Monero. They get caught because they're making a transaction with an FBI agent on the other side of that transaction. And it doesn't matter how private your coin is, when the guy receiving it gets it directly, and that guy on the other end is the FBI agent. Like, what is it like? I think it's like 98, 99% of all hitman for hire are undercover agent. Does it really matter what currency you're paying them in?
I would like to counteract your point here about the dark markets. I agree with you that Bitcoin doesn't need darknet markets anymore to be relevant. But if it could not serve darknet markets well, that would be a terrible litmus test for the viability of Bitcoin as a censorship-resistant sovereign currency. So if Bitcoin cannot serve darknet markets, we have a huge problem. And if Bitcoin can serve darknet markets, then I would really expect it to serve it just because it's simple to not have to convert to something else.
Yeah, no, Giacomo, you are absolutely right. And like I said, Monero is welcome to take over the darknet markets with their claims of privacy, which we don't believe in, that they're making you more private based on how people use them. And while, the FBI and the IRS and all the other agencies are scrambling and chasing and trying to de-anonymize Monero, Bitcoin is building privacy under the radar that's going to be perfectly fine while the government is wasting their resources trying to fight Monero. Great. I'm happy on both sides. I'm happy that like the darknet markets and the criminals are using Monero, taking resources away from the government, trying to fight Monero, because we all know that long term, Monero is not viable.
Good point. This was the decoy point in my presentation, the pro shitcoin presentation, the decoy destructive regulation. That's a very good point, right?
All right. I think on that note, we're going to end it unless Mechanic has a few quick words of wisdom to close us out.
I'm not really sure I do. I just want people, even though it's a waste of time, I'm going to say it anyway. I do want to extend an olive branch to the Monero community. And I'm probably repeating myself, but none of us would ever disrespect the ideology of wanting financial privacy because it's a human right. And the fact that this is such a priority to you is a credit to your morals as a person and the fact that you're using something like this. And it hurts when Monero people come along and tell us, you just want to push surveillance coin, all that stuff. We totally don't want to do that. That is not what we're in Bitcoin for. We're not in it to get rich, and we don't care about the privacy implications. Yeah, there might be, if you're looking at people on Michael Saylor's level or the very rich they don't care about KYC. They'll buy everything, they don't care about that. They're not in it for maybe those deep ideological reasons where, you want liberation from the authorities. And privacy is a necessary part of that. And it sucks that Bitcoin doesn't have it in on the base layer in the way that Monero does, but it doesn't do that because of laziness or because people don't care. It does that because it's just not a workable trade-off as far as Bitcoiners have decided. And that's a rational position to take. And that should be something that needs to be just kept in mind.
All right, Giacomo, final thoughts, and then we're going to close this out.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mechanic here. I will go even further, pissing off many of my followers that are also Saylor lovers. I think that the kind of Bitcoin Michael Saylor and others like him tend to talk about, like a fully regulated, state-compliant Bitcoin, that's another shitcoin. If your coin can be completely regulated, And if people can be completely surveyed and spied upon, then the coin can be completely captured and regulated. That's just a shitcoin. So Bitcoin is not just price dynamics, forget privacy. That's a shitcoin. And it cannot be just privacy, forget price dynamic and scalability and adoption and trade-offs. That would be another shitcoin. So the point is to really try to understand both aspects of Bitcoin, the cypherpunk one and the so-called Austrian financial one. And you have to serve both because one helps the other. Price dynamics help liquidity. Liquidity helps privacy, but then privacy helps censorship resistance, and censorship resistance helps price dynamics and harmony. So it's all a circle, and you cannot just have one. So it's not really taking the side of pro KYC Bitcoin. It's taking the side of Bitcoin. And if you want to use, if you feel super safe and super advanced, and you want to put Monero shitcoin exchange as a piece of your overall Bitcoin privacy solution, and you're really sure what you're doing, you have my respect and my blessing and my admiration. But if you just go around saying, switch to this shitcoin and you will have better privacy, be it be Green, Mimblewimble Coin, Dash, or Zcash, this is just straight out irresponsible and dangerous for people.
Boom.
Shit, my bad, I was muted. Thank you so much, guys. This was an excellent show, a great way to kick CryptoScam back off. We can do these shows more often if we do less research on these coins, because a lot of them are very, very similar. So feel free to let me know which shitcoin you guys want to tackle next from a more general perspective without digging in and wasting valuable effort on actually looking at it too far under the hood. And I'm happy to bring these more often. Yeah.
Let's while we're at it, Zcash and Dash are both bad jokes. Monero is, as much as we are not into Monero, Zcash and Dash are far worse. So if anyone's wondering, what about an alternative privacy coin? Monero is your best shot, and it still falls short.
Well, but it's a best shot today. Tomorrow, there could be a better version of Monero. And as much as the Monero maximalists would like to admit that they're not going to get off Monero, like they can't say that, right? If you are all about privacy and a better shitcoin has better privacy and you don't switch to that better shitcoin with better privacy, you are a hypocrite. So the Monero diehard believers, you're not really a Monero diehard believer, you're a privacy believer. And there should be absolutely nothing holding you to Monero in the long term if a better privacy solution comes along, or a more popular, equally private solution comes along. You're just holding on to your bags, trying to pump them higher. That's the only way for you to stay in Monero. And this is why you will not be able to take down Bitcoin and raise the price of your coin. This is one of the issues that they never want to admit, that they would all switch. I got Roger Ver to admit that he would switch from Bcash to another shitcoin if it had better features. And this happened back in the 2017 cruise that Giacomo was on, right? Like, you have no allegiance. You cannot take it to your grave if you're sitting on the feature of privacy as your only feature.
Yeah, the ultimate point is, if you have an amazing feature but you're centralized, I don't care what your feature is. It's like the old give me control over a nation's banking and its money, and I care not who makes its laws. It doesn't matter, because one comes after the other. And, it's as simple as that.
All right, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and see you all on the next one. Check out other CryptoScam episodes from back in the day below the video podcast in the CryptoScam playlist of this YouTube channel.
Giacomo.
And for more insight about Monero, again, I said at the beginning, check Skeptics Sundays from the Monero subreddit, because you can have actually Monero people getting into details of what we just said from a different angle, of course. See you for the next.
Send me a link to that. I'll add it to the video description.